Why being single in your golden years can bring more joy, health and freedom. The peace of solitude. Have you ever paused to wonder, as the years go by, whether being alone could actually bring you more joy and peace than being in a relationship? In the midst of our busy lives, we often hear that having a partner is essential for happiness, especially in our later years. But what if there was a different way to look at old age? What if being single, instead of lonely, could actually offer you freedom, peace, and a deep sense of fulfillment? In today's video, we're going to explore how embracing solitude in your golden years, rather than remaining tied to the expectations of partnership, might just lead you to a life that is more tranquil, independent, and truly joyful. Let's dive in. Insight number 1. The freedom of independence. The Buddha once imparted a timeless truth. You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. This wisdom is more than just a comforting thought. It is an urgent reminder, especially in the later stages of life, that self-respect, self-care, and self-determination are not luxuries. They are necessities. Society often paints solitude in old age as a grim fate, something to be feared or avoided. But what if, instead of loneliness, solitude offered something extraordinary: freedom, peace, and the unparalleled joy of living on your own terms? Consider the story of Margaret, a woman in her early 80s, whose life took an unexpected turn when her husband of many years passed away. At first, the silence of her home felt deafening, a stark contrast to the decades of shared conversations, daily routines, and the steady presence of another person. She found herself at a crossroads. She could either mourn the emptiness, or she could embrace the space as an opportunity. Slowly, she began to lean into the idea that this chapter of her life wasn't about loss, but about rediscovery. And rediscover she did. Margaret realized that for the first time in years, she had the freedom to shape her days exactly as she wished. She no longer had to wake up to the rhythm of another's schedule. There was no one waiting on breakfast, no expectation of when or how she spent her afternoons. So she did something simple, yet profoundly transformative. She listened to herself. She began each morning at her own pace, sipping coffee in the quiet stillness of dawn, letting the aroma fill the air as she read her favorite books in complete tranquility. She tended to her garden, not in hurried obligation, but with the kind of presence and mindfulness that turns a task into a meditation. She reconnected with music, rediscovered forgotten passions, and embraced the little pleasures that had once been overshadowed by the compromises of shared life. This was a different kind of peace, one she hadn't realized she needed. There was no need for explanations, no need to negotiate preferences, no guilt in indulging in the simple joys of solitude. This, she came to understand, was true autonomy. The Buddha's teachings on mindfulness emphasize the importance of living fully in the present moment, untethered from the weight of external expectations. Margaret's journey is a perfect embodiment of this principle. When she stopped seeking validation from the outside world and began honoring her own needs, she found something richer than companionship: self-contentment. And yet, let's be honest, choosing to embrace independence isn't always easy. Many people fear being alone, mistaking solitude for isolation. But the truth is, solitude is only lonely when it's forced upon you. When embraced willingly, it becomes a sanctuary. It allows you to listen to your own thoughts without interference, to make choices without negotiation, to live in a way that reflects you. In many ways, it is an opportunity to return to yourself after a lifetime of meeting the needs of others. Think about it. How many decisions, big and small, have been made with someone else in mind? What to cook for dinner, where to vacation, what to watch on TV, how often to entertain guests. These choices, once intertwined with another person's preferences, now belong solely to you. There is a deep relief in this, an ease that comes with no longer having to adjust. Margaret, like so many others who have walked this path, discovered that her golden years were not meant to be spent bending to routines that no longer served her. Instead, she was free to spend her time exactly as she pleased, finding beauty in the stillness, joy in the absence of compromise, and a newfound appreciation for the simplicity of being. And isn't that what true freedom is? The ability to wake up each day and decide for yourself how you want to live it. Insight number 2. Financial autonomy, a path to peace. Buddhism teaches that true contentment comes not from accumulating wealth, but from mastering our relationship with it. As the Buddha wisely said, riches are not for the wise. This doesn't mean we should reject financial stability, but rather that money in itself is not the goal. It is simply a tool, a means to create security, peace, and most importantly, freedom. For many, financial independence in old age is often overlooked in discussions about happiness. We hear a lot about companionship, health, and social connections. But what about the immense relief that comes from having complete control over your finances? The ability to make decisions without compromise, without guilt, without having to justify your choices to anyone, is a kind of liberation that is too often taken for granted. Take Alice, for example. For decades, she had shared financial responsibilities with her husband, John. Or rather, John had managed the money while Alice played a more passive role. He was the one who budgeted, the one who decided what was a necessary expense and what was frivolous. If Alice wanted to buy something just for herself, an art class, a new dress, a weekend getaway, there was always a conversation. Sometimes it was a debate, and sometimes it ended in disappointment. So when John passed away, Alice was faced with something she hadn't expected, a new kind of freedom, but also a daunting challenge. For the first time in her life, she had to manage everything on her own, paying bills, balancing a budget, making long-term financial decisions. The weight of it all felt overwhelming at first, like standing at the edge of an ocean with no idea how to swim. She had spent so many years deferring, compromising, considering someone else's needs before her own. Now, it was just her. But something fascinating happened. Slowly, as she began to navigate her new financial landscape, Alice realized something extraordinary. She was good at it. She was smart, capable, and most importantly, free. She no longer had to justify her spending habits. If she wanted to set aside money for a trip to Italy, she could. If she decided to invest in a new hobby, there was no one questioning the practicality of it. She didn't have to worry about whether someone else would approve of her choices. Every decision was hers, and that realization was incredibly empowering. In Buddhism, there is a teaching about letting go of attachment, not only to material things but to the expectations others place upon us. Alice's journey mirrors this lesson. Financial autonomy isn't just about having money. It's about reclaiming the power to make choices for yourself. It's about stepping out of the shadow of financial dependency and into the light of self-reliance. And here's the most beautiful part. As time went on, Alice didn't just feel secure, she felt peaceful. The kind of peace that comes from knowing she was in control of her own future. She set up a budget that allowed her to live comfortably, while still indulging in things that brought her joy. She donated to causes that resonated with her heart, no longer needing to debate whether it was a wise financial decision. She planned vacations without guilt. She finally bought that art set she had been eyeing for years. For Alice, financial independence wasn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It was about reclaiming herself, her freedom, her choices. This is a reality that so many people, particularly women of her generation, never get to fully experience. They spend their lives compromising, negotiating, asking for permission, until one day they don't have to anymore. And in that moment, they realize something profound. The ability to manage your own money isn't just practical, it's an act of self-respect. Because financial freedom isn't just about security, it's about autonomy. It's about waking up every morning and knowing that the decisions you make, the way you live, and the things you invest in are yours and yours alone. And isn't that the very definition of peace? Insight number 3, emotional freedom, letting go of attachments. In Buddhism, the concept of non-attachment is central to finding true peace. The Buddha taught that much of our suffering comes not from what happens to us, but from our grasping, our tendency to cling to things, people, and past experiences, even when they no longer serve us. Letting go is not about rejection or cold detachment. Rather, it is about freeing ourselves from the chains of expectation, guilt, and emotional entanglements that keep us from experiencing life as it is, in its most natural and peaceful form. For many, aging brings a unique opportunity, perhaps for the first time in decades, to release old burdens and reclaim a sense of emotional autonomy. And for Ruth, this was exactly the case. Ruth had spent most of her adult life in a marriage that from the outside appeared stable. To neighbors, friends, even her children, she and Robert seemed like a well-matched couple, partners who had weathered life's storms together. But inside the walls of their home, the reality was different. Robert was not a cruel man, not in the obvious ways. He never raised a hand or shouted. His criticism came in quiet, steady doses, a dismissive glance, a sharp comment, a sigh of disapproval. "Are you really wearing that? I don't see why you waste your time on that nonsense. You'd be happier if you just listened to me." Over the years, these words wove themselves into the fabric of Ruth's self-perception. Slowly she shrank, molded herself into someone more acceptable, more palatable. She became quieter, softer, easier. But then Robert passed away, and in the silence that followed, something surprising happened. Relief, not all at once, of course. At first, it was just a quiet absence, an empty chair at the dinner table, a house that didn't hum with tension. Then, slowly, it became something more, a lightness, a deep breath, a moment of laughter at a silly memory, without the fear of being told she was too emotional. And then one day it hit her. She was free, free to wake up when she pleased, free to cook whatever she wanted, without hearing a comment about how she never got it quite right. Free to take long walks without explaining why she needed time alone. Free to exist without constantly adjusting herself for someone else's approval. At first, she felt guilty for enjoying this newfound peace. Was it wrong to feel this way? Was she being selfish? But the more she sat with it, the clearer it became. She had not lost herself when Robert passed. She had found herself. Buddhist teachings remind us that clinging to relationships that drain us is like holding onto a rope that is burning our hands. Sometimes, the only way to stop the pain is to let go. Ruth had spent years holding on, convincing herself that if she just tried harder, loved more, compromised further, things would change. But now, standing on the other side, she saw the truth. Her peace had always been within reach. She had just been too afraid to claim it. Now Ruth wakes up every morning with a newfound sense of clarity. She journals, she paints, she calls her children without worrying about whether she'll be told she's interrupting something important. She walks barefoot in the garden simply because she can. She has, at last, let go. And isn't that what emotional freedom truly is? Not an escape from love or relationships, but a release from the need to be anything other than who you are. A life lived not in reaction to someone else's moods, judgments, or demands, but in full alignment with your own truth. As the Buddha said, when we let go of what we no longer need, we create space for peace and clarity. Ruth's journey is a testament to that truth. By stepping away from the emotional weight of a life spent seeking validation, she stepped into something infinitely more valuable, herself. Insight number 4, health and wellness, nurturing the self. Aging is often framed as a process of decline, a slow surrender of vitality. But what if, instead of seeing it as a loss, we viewed it as an opportunity, a second chance to truly care for ourselves in a way that many of us never had time for before? As the Buddha taught, to keep the body in good health is a duty, otherwise we shall not be able to keep our mind strong and clear. In other words, health isn't just about living longer, it's about living well. One of the greatest gifts of living alone in old age is the ability to prioritize your health and well-being. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, you have the freedom to focus on your own body, mind, and spirit. No more worrying about cooking meals to suit someone else's preferences. No more adjusting your schedule around another person's habits. This is your time, your space, and your opportunity to create a life that feels good from the inside out. Just ask Tom. For most of his life, Tom had been a caregiver. His wife, Margaret, had struggled with health issues for years, and as her condition worsened, Tom naturally took on the role of caretaker. He drove her to doctor's appointments, managed medications, prepared meals that suited her dietary restrictions. He was there day in and day out, ensuring she had everything she needed. And while he did it with love, there was a cost. His own health had taken a back seat. Tom had always enjoyed long walks, but they became infrequent. He used to cook balanced, nutritious meals, but over time, quick and easy became the norm. His own doctor's appointments, those could wait. Margaret needed him more, and then suddenly, she was gone. At first, Tom felt lost. The silence in the house was unbearable. Without Margaret to care for, his days stretched out before him, empty and uncertain. He didn't know where to begin, how to fill the time that had once been consumed by the rhythms of caregiving. But then, one morning, something shifted. As he sat at the kitchen table, staring at the same old bowl of sugary cereal he'd been eating out of habit, a thought crossed his mind. What if I started taking care of myself the way I took care of her? So he did. It started small, a short walk around the block, just 10 minutes. The next day, 15, then 20. He swapped out processed meals for fresh, home-cooked dishes, paying attention to what made him feel good rather than just what was easy. He reintroduced stretching into his morning routine, then eventually found himself practicing light yoga, something he never imagined he'd enjoy. And the result? Tom felt alive in a way he hadn't in years. His energy levels increased, his sleep improved. He no longer felt sluggish in the afternoons, no longer woke up with aching joints from too many hours spent sedentary. And perhaps most importantly, his mind felt clearer. The fog of grief and exhaustion that had hung over him began to lift, replaced by a quiet sense of purpose. Buddhism teaches that the body and mind are deeply interconnected. When we care for one, we nourish the other. Tom's journey reflects this perfectly. By prioritizing his physical well-being, he inadvertently strengthened his emotional resilience as well. His daily walks became a form of moving meditation, a time for reflection and gratitude. His meal preparation transformed into an act of mindfulness, a way to honor his body rather than just fuel it. And here's the thing, Tom wasn't trying to turn back the clock. He wasn't chasing youth. He was simply embracing the reality that health, at any age, is a gift worth nurturing. Many people assume that old age means inevitable decline, but what if we reframed it? What if, instead of seeing our later years as a time of deterioration, we saw them as a time of optimization, a period where, for once, we are free from the burdens of career pressures, child-rearing, and societal expectations, where we can finally give ourselves the care and attention we deserve. For Tom, living alone wasn't an end. It was a beginning, a chance to focus not on loss, but on gaining strength, clarity, vitality. And isn't that what true wellness is all about? Not just adding years to life, but adding life to years. Insight number 5. More time for personal interests. Rediscovering passion and purpose. Buddhism teaches that personal growth is not limited by age, nor is self-discovery something that ends when we reach a certain stage in life. Instead, it is a continuous journey, one that evolves as we do. The Buddha once said, "The mind is everything. What you think, you become." In other words, our thoughts, passions, and pursuits shape our existence. And what better time to explore them than in the golden years when the obligations of career and family no longer dictate our every move. For decades, life moves at an unrelenting pace. We spend our younger years building careers, raising families, and making sacrifices for the people we love. It's easy, almost inevitable, to put our own interests on the back burner, telling ourselves that one day we'll return to them. But for many, that day never seems to arrive, until suddenly it does. And often, it comes in the form of an empty house, a quiet schedule, and a question that lingers in the back of the mind. Now what? That's exactly what happened to Geraldine. At 75, Geraldine found herself facing a reality she hadn't quite anticipated. She had spent most of her adult life supporting her husband's career, managing the household, and raising their children. Her time was never really hers. It was spent making sure everyone else was taken care of. Meals cooked, clothes washed, school events attended, doctor's appointments scheduled. And while she did it all with love, it left little space for her own desires. After her husband's passing, and with her children now living independent lives, she was met with an unfamiliar sensation. Free time, lots of it, and at first, it felt almost unsettling. Without a structured routine, without someone else's needs to prioritize, her days stretched out before her like a blank canvas, full of potential but overwhelming in its emptiness. And then she remembered painting. As a young woman, Geraldine had loved to paint. She could still recall the feeling of losing herself in the strokes of a brush, the way colors blended and danced on the canvas. But life had a way of pulling her in other directions, and somewhere along the way, her passion had been packed away along with her old art supplies. Now, with nothing but time, she decided to pick up a brush again. At first, it felt awkward. Her hands weren't as steady, and her technique was rusty, but she kept at it. She signed up for a local art class, met others who shared her enthusiasm, and slowly she found herself falling in love with the process all over again. What had once been a forgotten hobby became a lifeline, a reason to wake up excited, a source of fulfillment that was just for her. And it didn't stop there. As she painted, she began to feel something she hadn't felt in years, a deep, unshakable sense of purpose. She wasn't just passing time, she was creating, expressing, reclaiming a part of herself she had long buried beneath the responsibilities of daily life. Eventually, she started showcasing her work in local galleries, something she never would have imagined doing in her younger years. Buddhist philosophy emphasizes that self-expression is a vital part of the human experience. Our souls crave creativity, learning, and exploration, not for external validation, but because these pursuits nourish us from within. When we ignore our passions, we deny ourselves one of the purest forms of joy. And in old age, without the distractions of obligation and compromise, we finally have the chance to listen to that inner calling. But Geraldine's story isn't just about art, it's about rediscovery, about finding that thing, whether it's painting, writing, music, gardening, or even something entirely new that makes you feel alive again. Too often, we believe that passions are reserved for the young. But why? Who says a 75-year-old woman can't become an artist? Who says an 80-year-old man can't learn to play the piano? Who decided that hobbies and dreams have an expiration date? They don't. The beauty of growing older is that for the first time in a long time, life is yours. No schedules to coordinate, no expectations to meet, no need to justify how you spend your hours. Just pure, unfiltered freedom to explore whatever lights you up inside. For Geraldine, being single wasn't about being alone. It was about reclaiming herself. And in doing so, she discovered something that had been waiting for her all along. The joy of doing something simply because it makes you happy. And isn't that, in the end, what life should be about? Insight number 6. Peace and quiet, a sanctuary for the soul. We live in a world that glorifies noise. From the moment we wake up, we are surrounded by it. Conversations, television, traffic, social media, the endless hum of daily life. Many people spend their lives in relationships where silence is rare, where the air is always filled with the sound of negotiation, compromise, or even conflict. But what happens when all of that fades? What happens when the house is no longer shared, when the chatter dies down, and you are left with something that many fear but few truly understand? Solitude. For Alice, that moment arrived suddenly. After decades of marriage, she found herself alone for the first time in years. At first, the silence was unsettling, almost too loud in its own way. The absence of another person's presence, the sounds of footsteps, a clearing throat, an offhand remark, felt like a void. She would wake up and instinctively listen for a voice that was no longer there. Meals eaten in quiet felt unnatural. The television played in the background, not because she wanted to watch, but because she needed something to fill the empty space. But then something shifted. One evening, after turning off the TV for the first time in days, Alice sat in her living room with nothing but the soft ticking of the clock and the occasional creak of the house settling. And for the first time in a long time, she truly listened, not to external noise, but to herself. She paid attention to her own breathing, to the way her body felt at rest. She noticed how the sunlight filtered through the curtains in the late afternoon, how the wind whispered against the window pane, and in that quiet moment, something unexpected happened. She exhaled, not just a physical breath, but an emotional one, a release, a surrender. The quiet, which once felt like loneliness, was beginning to feel like peace. Buddhism teaches that true serenity comes from within. The Buddha once said, "Do not seek peace outside yourself." In other words, no person, no relationship, no external circumstance can bring lasting tranquility. It must be cultivated from within and in solitude, without the distractions of another's voice, expectations, or presence. We are given the rare opportunity to meet ourselves again. Alice began to lean into this newfound stillness. She started her mornings with a cup of tea, sitting by the window, watching the world wake up. No rush, no conversation to entertain, just being. She picked up books she had once neglected, allowing herself to get lost in their pages without interruption. She began meditating, even if just for a few minutes, letting the silence settle in her bones rather than fearing it. And in doing so, she realized something profound. Her home was no longer just a place she lived. It was her sanctuary. Without the noise of another person's habits, opinions, or moods shaping her day, she was free to create an environment that nourished her. She lit candles in the evening, played soft instrumental music, and rearranged her space to reflect her own energy rather than accommodate someone else's. The home that once felt too quiet now felt calm. The silence that once seemed empty now felt full of presence, of mindfulness, of peace. And isn't that the beauty of solitude? The ability to hear yourself think, to exist in a space that is entirely your own, to embrace stillness, not as something to be feared, but as something to be cherished. Too often people mistake solitude for isolation, assuming that being alone means being lonely. But loneliness is not about the absence of people, it is about the absence of connection. And when you are truly connected to yourself, to the present moment, to the simple joys of being, you realize that solitude is not a punishment, it is a gift. Alice, like so many others, found that peace wasn't something she had to go searching for. It was already within her, waiting for her to slow down, to be still, to listen. As the Buddha said, peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. In the sanctuary of her own quiet world, Alice had found exactly what she had been missing all along: herself. Insight number 7. Relationships without the pressure. Companionship on your own terms. Love in all its forms is one of the most profound experiences in life. But as we grow older, the way we define connection begins to change. In youth, relationships are often entangled with expectation, romance, commitment, sacrifice, and inevitably, compromise. We are taught that happiness is found in partnership, that love must come in the shape of a lifelong commitment, that being alone is something to be avoided at all costs. But what if that isn't true? What if, in old age, relationships could be something different, lighter, freer, more joyful? The Buddha taught that love should be grounded in metta, loving kindness. This kind of love isn't possessive, isn't demanding. It isn't about control, obligation, or societal expectations. Instead, it is about pure connection, an appreciation for others without the need to bind them to us. In many ways, this is the kind of love that becomes most valuable as we age, the kind that exists without pressure, without weight, without need. This is something Robert, an 80-year-old retired teacher, discovered unexpectedly. For years, Robert had been a man who believed in the idea of forever. He had married young, built a life with his wife, and spent decades being a devoted husband and father. But when his wife passed away, the world as he knew it shifted. At first there was an aching loneliness, a feeling that he had lost not only his partner, but also the rhythm of companionship that had defined his daily life. Friends and family often asked if he would ever consider dating again. "You shouldn't be alone," they would say. "Wouldn't it be nice to have someone?" And for a while, Robert believed them. He thought perhaps he should want to remarry, to find another person to fill the space his wife had left behind. He even went on a few dates, but something never quite felt right. It wasn't that the women he met weren't lovely. It was that for the first time in his life, Robert felt complete on his own. He didn't need another great romance. He didn't want to step into another lifelong commitment or navigate the complexities of merging his life with someone else's. What he wanted, what truly made him happy, was companionship without expectation. And so he began to nurture a different kind of relationship, the kind that wasn't about romantic pursuit, but rather about shared joy. Robert had always loved gardening, and he found himself drawn to a local community garden where fellow enthusiasts gathered. What started as a simple hobby soon became something much more: afternoons spent side by side with new friends, swapping seeds and stories, laughter over cups of tea in between tending to the soil. There was no pressure, no obligations, no need to be anything other than himself. He spent his weekends with friends who loved the same things he did, some from the garden, others from his book club, a few from his local community center. They would go on walks, share meals, celebrate birthdays with small, thoughtful gatherings. There was warmth, there was connection, but most importantly, there was ease. No expectations, no compromises, no complicated emotional entanglements, just genuine, unfiltered companionship. And isn't that the most beautiful kind of relationship? Buddhism teaches that true connection does not seek to possess. Love, when pure, does not say, "You belong to me." It says, "I appreciate you, just as you are." When we release the pressure of what a relationship should be, we open ourselves to experiencing it in its most natural, fulfilling form. For Robert, this was a revelation. He no longer measured his happiness by whether or not he had a romantic partner. Instead, he found joy in the simple, everyday connections with his neighbors, with his friends, with the people who made him laugh, who listened, who shared in life's small, meaningful moments. Too often, society pushes the idea that being single in old age is something to be fixed, that a person is incomplete without a partner. But what if we shifted that perspective? What if, instead of looking for someone to complete us, we simply surrounded ourselves with people who bring us joy? There is a certain peace that comes with relationships that are free of obligation. No compromises, no navigating shared bank accounts, no wondering whether your habits or choices will be met with approval or resistance. Just friendship, just connection, just love, in its simplest and most freeing form. Robert found that in embracing this kind of companionship, he had built a life that was full, not of romance, but of warmth. He was not alone. In fact, he had never felt less alone. His life was abundant with laughter, with care, with moments of simple joy. And so perhaps, the greatest lesson in all of this is that relationships in old age do not have to follow the same script they did in youth. They can be rewritten, they can be lighter, they can be whatever you want them to be. As the Buddha taught, let go of what does not serve you, and peace will find you. For Robert, and for so many others, that peace was found in friendship, in connection, in love that did not ask for anything in return, except to be cherished, exactly as it was. As we've seen, the benefits of being single in old age are many. From the freedom to design your days to the peace of creating a life on your own terms, being single offers the opportunity for emotional healing, health, and personal fulfillment. And let's not forget the freedom to cultivate relationships based on mutual respect, without the weight of romantic expectations. In the wisdom of the Buddha, we are reminded that the only real failure in life is not to be true to what you know to be right. Living authentically, without the need for constant compromise, creates a life rich with peace, balance, and joy. So if you're living solo in your golden years, remember that sometimes solitude is exactly what you need to truly thrive. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you've resonated with these insights, share your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know how you found peace and fulfillment in your own life. Until next time, take care and embrace the quiet wisdom that comes with living on your own terms.